I almost bailed on being a filmmaker. And the thing that kept me in the game was the possibility of the Avatar universe reaching a lot of people with a persistent message and reaction on the part of the audience to maybe fight for and protect.
James Cameron doesn't just direct films, he commands them like deep-sea missions or interstellar wars. Every frame, every breath, every blink must serve his vision. While some actors rose to the challenge, others collided headfirst with his unforgiving standards. These weren't minor disagreements. They were explosive fallouts that left bruised egos and broken professional ties in their wake. So, which 6 actors made it onto Cameron's blacklist? And why did it get so personal? Stick around, because this countdown dives deep, and it's not coming up for air anytime soon. Number 6. Michael Biehn. When Michael Biehn first met James Cameron on The Terminator, the spark was immediate. Cameron saw in Biehn the desperate resolve needed for Kyle Reese, and Biehn admired Cameron's cinematic vision. Those early days were marked by mutual respect, Cameron pushing hard, Biehn responding with raw energy. But even then, beneath that synergy, a seed of tension took root. Cameron's obsessive standards were emerging, and Biehn sensed the price. Their partnership deepened 2 years later on Aliens. Bigger budget, higher stakes, more pressure. Cameron elevated his demands: endless takes, minute adjustments, precision beyond actors' comfort. Biehn replaced another performer mid-shoot, trusted to step in, but inherited the tension. Cameron drove him hard, expecting Biehn not just to perform, but to embody the character exactly as Cameron saw him. Biehn delivered his iconic performance as Corporal Hicks, but the credit came wrapped in fatigue and growing friction. Cameron's critiques sharpened, veering into personal territory. There was no room for instinct, only for Cameron's interpretation. Then came The Abyss, the crucible that tested both men. Filmed almost entirely underwater in a vast 7.5 million-gallon tank, the shoot demanded that actors breathe through regulators, work in near-zero visibility, and endure freezing hours. The set earned the nickname Gulag Gaffney. The cast and crew physically and psychologically broke down. Cameron controlled every aspect, and Biehn found himself the focal point of the director's scorn when scenes fell short. Mid-air, or rather mid-water, the tension surfaced. When Biehn gave a take, Cameron stepped closer, voice low and icy. "Michael, that's exactly what I don't want." The words felt like ice cracking beneath him. Biehn, hands shaking, swallowed the rebuke. In that instant, he bristled. "What the fuck do you want, Jim?" Cameron didn't soften. Instead, he crossed the line into micromanaging, feeding Biehn line by line, direction by direction, eroding the actor's confidence. Biehn had proven himself before, but now he was reduced to a vessel for Cameron's will. Verbal fire met in hushed intensity beneath the waves. Cameron would bark instructions mid-take, halting the scene. Biehn would storm away, dripping and defiantly silent. Every day became a test, for Biehn to prove his instincts, for Cameron to demand absolute control. The set crackled with hostility. Biehn later recalled pure hatred on that set. Fights were breaking out, hostile feelings. Yet their clash remained unspoken, electric, suffocating. The worst moment wasn't physical, it was emotional. Cameron's rejection stung more than the freezing depths ever could. When Biehn handed a performance embroidered with desperation, Cameron dismissed it as not enough. Each time Cameron muttered a cold line reading, the silent message was, "You're not what I need." Still, Biehn stayed. He bore the brunt without collapse. He learned to breathe slower, think sharper. He learned to fight the urge to shrink, but he carried a grudge. He began to question, why push me so hard? Why suggest I lack what I brought to aliens? Bien later admitted the tension burned inside him, but he also confessed weird loyalty. I would take a bullet for Jim Cameron. He acknowledged Cameron's vision demanded sacrifice, even if that sacrifice was occasionally at the expense of his own confidence. When aliens rapped, there was relief. There was a reconciliation buried under exhaustion. But they wouldn't work together again after the abyss. Cameron never yelled at Bien again, nor did Bien get another shot in Cameron's next epic. Their bond fractured, wounded by perfectionism and bruised by doubt. Despite the fractures, the legacy stands. 3 iconic films created under a volatile, creative spark. The Terminator introduced them. Alien solidified their collaboration. The Abyss shattered them. Bien's haunted eyes in the water. Cameron's unyielding gaze through the scuba mask. Both staking claim over a vision stronger than their relationship. Their partnership was ultimate artistry bound by silent animosity. It's a story of 2 forces in collision. Bien, wrestling with self-doubt stoked by Cameron's intensity. Cameron, torn between his drive for perfection and his need to trust an actor he'd chosen twice, yet bullied through his own ambition. Their clash left scars, silent grudges, questions left unsaid, respect tangled with resentment. The fact they never publicly disavowed each other reveals the complexity. Neither man would undermine their reputation. But behind the curtain, their creative battlefield shaped cinema's most immersive underwater saga. The Abyss went on to win an Oscar for visual effects. But deeper than that, it captured the cost of uncompromised artistry, the cost exacted on actor and director alike. In the end, Michael Biehn and James Cameron emerged from the depths altered. Biehn, wiser, tempered, wary of perfectionist scrutiny. Cameron's empire intact, but his trust in even his most reliable collaborators chipped. Their relationship remains a quietly explosive testament to the price of raising cinema to its limits. But as Cameron pushed further, which actor would be tested next under his unyielding vision? Keep watching. Number 5. Linda Hamilton. When Sarah Connor fought back. By the time Terminator 2 rolled around, Linda Hamilton was no longer a Hollywood ingenue. This was Sarah Connor, a warrior who hadn't slept for a decade, fueled by trauma and survival instinct. But the transformation from waitress to commando didn't happen by magic. It took Cameron's fierce demands, Hamilton's fierce determination, and a bond that fractured under stress. Before cameras even rolled, Cameron summoned Hamilton for a revealing conversation. He told her he'd envisioned Sarah locked away. "Crazy," he said. She responded with a hunger. Yes, she wanted to dive headlong into the madness, but behind that agreement lay tension. This wasn't a reunion, it was a reckoning. Hamilton had to prove she could live up to Cameron's ultra-violent vision, or risk being exposed as trapped in her old, softer roles. The training that followed felt military-grade. Only weeks after giving birth, Hamilton was dropped into a punishing regime. 3-hour workouts 6 days a week, weapons training under a former Israeli commando, grueling strength sessions, and shotgun drills. She bleached off her post-maternity body, hunger-crazed, dehydrated, sleep-deprived. 4 hours of sleep? Luxury. She bench-pressed heavy barbells like a soldier, and ironically, sometimes struggled to pick up her infant son afterwards. It was enough to crack anyone. But Hamilton cracked when Cameron started pushing her emotionally, not just physically. He was theatrical in his demands. More ferocity, more pain. Make me believe you're unhinged. But he never said why. He didn't reassure, compliment, or thank. She fired take after take, drifting further from herself, spiraling into Sarah's madness. But Cameron widened the distance. Deep on set in the steel mill where the T-1000 rained bullets, Hamilton's psyche felt like one of Cameron's animatronic puppets, controlled, precise, stripped of softness. On more than one occasion, she snapped, storming off from the crew mid-scene, her breathing ragged, eyes hollow. She'd return, though, wipe tears, and bury herself in the next shot. The tension became a silent war. Would she crumble or become Sarah, the soldier he demanded? Arnold Schwarzenegger, quietly powerful, watched this dance with surprise. He admired her result, but he also recognized the cost. When he first saw her bulging biceps, every vein pronounced, he turned pale. "Son of a bitch is more cut than me," he cracked. But the joke was hollow. People on set whispered about Hamilton's body not just as strong, but haunted. The weapon drills got brutal. Hamilton, blindfolded, swung at targets while her trainer yelled fire commands. She missed at first, flinched. Cameron watched without skipping a beat. She practiced loading clips one-handed, scanning rooms, marking kills. A choreography of paranoia. She could have walked away. Many would, but Cameron kept pushing, escalating. Each time she got close, he shoved the goalpost. What tipped the balance wasn't a fight. It was a breakdown moment. The production shortened pre-production, threw schedules at the wall, and hired her anyway. The emotional drain had built into a storm cloud, and one night, after a particularly grueling take in freezing temperatures, Hamilton collapsed. Back on set, she hovered on the edge of collapse, still in character, still repeating the scene, still biting the bullet. The crew felt it. This wasn't performance. This was survival. Well, after shooting ended, Terminator 2 broke box office records and won Oscars. Cameron took home Best Director. Hamilton was celebrated as a cinematic badass. Muscles, scars, trauma, triumph. But the triumph came at a price. She erupted privately at press events. Furious, she was paid far less than Schwarzenegger, despite carrying the emotional weight of the role. She confronted Cameron about it, essentially demanding value, not just money, but respect. His reply? He said he needed her to make Sarah real, but he also admitted he was relentless. He had driven her so far precisely because he believed in her power. Their relationship had become turbulent. For a time, it fractured, hundreds of miles of silent distance on set. They spoke sparingly, but they also built something unforgettable. Today, they're cordial, but you can still sense the tension. Hamilton walked away from Hollywood at points, flush with divorce money and shaken by exhaustion and mental health battles. She never cursed Cameron in interviews. She never said she regretted playing Sarah. But the subtext was loud. "I stepped into hell to give this you, Cameron, and it nearly broke me." Their post-T2 relationship would rebound. They married, then divorced. Had a daughter. He moved on to Titanic. She moved on to therapy and quieter projects. But no matter what, the intensity, the fury, and the grudging respect linger. Every time Cameron directs an actress into physical or psychological hell, people remember. He did it with Hamilton first. He did it harder than anyone else dared. So, did they hate each other? Maybe for a minute, after another brutal take, when she stormed off, when he called cut, and their eyes locked in exhaustion and challenge. But hatred would have been too simple. What they shared was complexity, pain and respect intertwined. forging the most iconic female action hero ever to stand beside Schwarzenegger. That tension didn't hurt T2, it made T2 unforgettable. "I don't just cast actors to play characters," Cameron once explained. "I cast people who can survive inside the world I'm building, because if they don't believe it, no one watching will." Number 4. Sam Worthington in Avatar. When Sam Worthington first stepped onto the secretive Avatar set, he was an unknown Australian actor living in his car, scrappy, raw, and armed with nothing but talent and guts. Cameron had summoned him for what he promised would be a performance-driven sci-fi epic, not a spectacle. But what unfolded was a silent clash. Cameron's towering ambition versus Worthington's hesitance under the pressure of tech-laden stakes. From the start, there was a spark, but not the warm kind. Cameron dropped him into a 3-day immersion in a Costa Rican rainforest, clothed only in a loincloth and a bow, to find his character's primal rhythm. Worthington sprinted across muddy trails, surrounded by humming insects and dripping foliage, every breath reminding him he was far from the dusty Australian runways he'd known. Observers said Worthington looked equal parts terrified and intrigued. Cameron, with his tiny handheld cam, filmed him intimately, watching for something Worthington didn't yet know he carried. Back in the studio's giant gray volume, a blank canvas for Pandora, Cameron's scrutiny grew sharper. With hundreds of dots dotting his face and motion capture suit clinging to his body, Worthington's every twitch was under a microscope. No green screen could shield him from that gaze. Cameron would replay takes repeatedly, cutting deeper into Worthington's nerves. "Show me your spirit," he'd demand. "Be the warrior. Live the legend." But Worthington, still finding his voice, sometimes faltered. In early motion capture tests, he held himself back, hesitated with dialogue, reserved his expressions, as if he were caught in a dream he couldn't fully claim. Cameron noticed. He didn't corner Worthington. Instead, he ramped up the intensity. He'd extend scenes by minutes, force endless repetition, and change camera placements mid-shot. The message: earn it. Visible stiffness began to show in Worthington's performances, an internal friction that Cameron wouldn't ignore. Personal doubts festered in Worthington. He admitted later he'd been skeptical that subtle acting would translate through technology, but Cameron promised otherwise. And yet, the process drained him. He spent 14 months, some 18-hour days, immersed in a world of gray stages and digital landscapes, unsure if his humanity would survive the ordeal. There were grudging mentions of collision between man and vision. Worthington joked later that Jim and I had sort of a love-hate relationship. He pushed me and everybody else, but you put sand in an oyster to get a pearl. But in the moment, Cameron's relentless demands felt more like pressure that they might both shatter under. On one particularly grueling motion capture sequence, Worthington could barely lift his arms, physically exhausted, emotionally flat, and Cameron held the scene hostage until he saw bones behind Worthington's eyes. Rumor has it the director stopped the scene midway, and Worthington stormed off, frustrated and depleted. Cameron didn't chase him. Instead, he started shooting a crew close-up, as if signaling the show goes on, without you, if you must. Still, Worthington bore the strain. He described himself as Cameron's guinea pig, especially when he had to hold his breath underwater for The Way of Water. But the roots were planted here. He knew Cameron was building something new, and he was the brick in the wall. Small breakthroughs arrived. Cameron praised Worthington's fearless "fuck you" attitude during auditions for Avatar, the gum-spitting scene that initially pissed off the casting team but earned Cameron's respect. That hint of defiance reminded Cameron what he valued: raw, unfiltered life. But on set, that spirit met friction. Cameron expected more than heart. He demanded precision. When Worthington faltered, Cameron didn't scold. He froze him out, rewrote scenes on the fly, or reordered shooting schedules to see if Worthington could break himself down and rise again. Crew members whispered that Worthington was always like that, visible discomfort, a man stretched between gratitude and dread. The tension culminated during the climactic Na'vi character arc. Jake's anger, confusion, love, and primal roar had to light Pandora on fire, and Worthington nearly lost himself trying. On the final take, Cameron yelled, "Cut!" and held his breath, searching Worthington's face for absolute surrender. Worthington crumpled. Tears, exhaustion, everything dumped onto Pandora's virtual soil. Cameron nodded once. That was it. When Avatar debuted in 2009, the result was seismic, subtle yet vast, a film that made audiences feel and breathe. It became the highest-grossing film ever. Cameron praised Worthington's soul. It was real, raw, alive. Worthington, in turn, called Cameron a genius, but admitted the experience left him angry, exhausted, and exponentially better. In press later, he called Cameron his friend, but admitted the process fucked me up. So, what was their bond? A fragile alliance built on tension. Cameron recognized Worthington's steel, then pushed until it bent. Worthington endured Cameron's pressure, transforming into a man of legend. Not love, not hatred, something sharper. Mutual wariness, respect, and a pact forged under fire. As Sam became the face of a global phenomenon, Cameron didn't relent. He raised the stakes again. As he once said, "If the audience doesn't feel the character breaking, crying, or bleeding, then I haven't done my job as a director." Number 3. Kate Winslet, The Titanic. When a young Kate Winslet first stepped onto the Titanic set, she brought raw talent and fervent ambition. But what she encountered was a crucible. James Cameron wasn't just directing, he was waging war. The early 1990s spectacle was his Everest. A 3-hour film, filmed in a 17-million-gallon tank in Mexico, shooting into the early hours with zero margin for error. Under Cameron's whip, Titanic became legendary for its ambition and infamous for its cruelty. Winslet, only 20, faced 90-hour work weeks, frigid water, hypothermia, bruises, and a near-drowning incident when her coat snagged underwater. While other actors cracked, she stayed until she didn't. After a terrifying scene where she truly feared she might not surface, she emerged trembling, her spirit soaked by the ice, and dropped a public line that reverberated through Hollywood. "You'd have to pay me a lot of money to work with Jim again." Why such visceral tension? Cameron wasn't just demanding excellence, he wanted raw, instinctive emotion. He pushed Winslet into extremes, both physical and emotional. Night shoots in pitch-black water, weighty period costumes, and explosive timelines. Someone messed up, even by seconds, and Cameron's wrath was legendary. A crew member told the press he'd 300-decibel scream from a 162-foot crane if something went wrong. Kate took it head-on, but by the end of a brutal 20-hour day, drenched and exhausted, she found herself too close to breaking. There were no warm words from Cameron. If a shot missed timing by even a second, he'd yell, "That's exactly what I didn't want." Winslet chipped a bone in her elbow, was covered in bruises, coughed through colds and kidney infections, and still, when she froze underwater, Cameron simply said, "Okay, let's go again." It wasn't anger, just remorseless expectation, like he'd erased her pain the second she took a breath. Through all that, a fault line developed. Kate delivered. Any less was unacceptable. But Cameron thought she was holding back. Perhaps she hesitated on a line, lost a quiet wince beneath the water's surface, or lacked raw chaos in her performance. He demanded stormy emotion. She delivered perfection. But perfection wasn't enough. What he craved was dangerous fragility, something nearly broken. He wanted not just Rose the aristocrat, but Rose unraveling, body and soul. Crew whisperings echoed. Winslet was brave, talented, and trying to hold on to control. Cameron sensed hesitation. That suspicion bred distance, fewer conversations, more cold calls across the tank mic. She dared not cross him. He dared her not to crack. Their relationship was steel and ice, and both were fracturing. Despite the trauma, Kate powered through. The audience saw a magnetic Rose, but off-screen, she was drained. By rap, she openly admitted being genuinely frightened of Cameron. The grudge hit its peak during press promos when she claimed she would only come back for a lot of money. A jab at a man she respected but feared was capable of cruelty. Over time, Winslet softened her tone, calling Cameron a genius and returning for the Avatar sequel, noting his evolution into a more calm director. Cameron echoed the sentiment, saying he's learned to admit mistakes and that Titanic left her a bit traumatized, but also large and in charge on set. But don't mistake their current respect for resolution. That shoot nearly broke both of them, her physically, him emotionally. They walked through freezing water, through 20-hour nights, through camera control and emotional crucibles. She didn't collapse entirely, but she carried scars. He didn't retreat, but he bore her rage and fatigue in silence. So, did they hate each other, kind of? Not openly, not now, but for months, behind those lenses and beneath those waves, there was a grudging clash between actor and director, star and visionary. Each demanded more from the other than either thought possible. And in the tension, Titanic was born. Number 2. Arnold Schwarzenegger. The Terminator. The moment Arnold Schwarzenegger walked onto the set of The Terminator, something changed in the room. He wasn't just a bodybuilder turned actor. He was a storm wrapped in muscle. But what really raised the voltage on set wasn't his size. It was the presence of two giants, one built of steel, the other of vision, colliding under the pressure of a single film. James Cameron had found his perfect machine. Arnold, however, hadn't come to take orders. Cameron believed in complete control. He didn't just direct scenes, he directed seconds, syllables, stares. And when Arnold pushed back, the atmosphere turned icy. One flashpoint came early, the infamous "I'll be back." Arnold thought it sounded awkward in his accent and tried to change it to "I will be back." That small tweak lit a fuse. Cameron snapped, "Are you the writer now?" Arnold snapped back, "You tell me how to act every minute." There was no laughter, no nod of respect. Only a line drawn in the sand. The line would be delivered Cameron's way, and it would take dozens of takes to get there. Arnold, used to commanding the room, found himself corralled, drilled into mechanical perfection. Cameron didn't just want power on camera, he wanted precision, and that meant rep after rep, emotionless delivery, no room for charm. Arnold performed, but the sting of being micromanaged never faded. Their silent battle didn't stop there. On the set of True Lies in 1994, it only got weirder. In one infamous moment, while filming in a fake Harrier jet, Arnold desperately needed a bathroom break. Cameron refused. "You're a military man on a mission," he barked. "What if you were a real pilot? Would you land just to pee? It was absurd, yet deadly serious. Arnold, playing a super spy, had to clench through it like it was part of the script. The tension had matured, not into respect, but into an unspoken game of endurance. It wasn't just Arnold who felt the heat. Crew members on Terminator 2, released in 1991, remembered Cameron's tantrums well. He was known to yell so often that someone printed his greatest hits on a crew t-shirt. Bathroom breaks were timed like mission drills, praise was rare, and no one dared show up late. When Arnold did, after a casual visit to Washington, Cameron threatened to replace him with director Paul Verhoeven. The message was clear. No one, not even a box office titan, was above his vision. And yet, amid this creative warfare, something magnetic happened. The tension shaped the characters, sharpened the story, and gave audiences something unforgettable. Arnold's restrained intensity, the cold detachment of the Terminator, wasn't just acting. It was born from suppression, from Cameron pressing down on every instinct Arnold had. The result was terrifyingly perfect. Cameron saw the big picture. He wanted machines that moved like machines. He didn't want Arnold the star. He wanted Arnold the tool. But Arnold, even under the weight of relentless direction, managed to sneak humanity into his performance. That glint of rebellion in his eye, that flicker beneath the robotic exterior, it came from a man fighting to leave his mark on a script that tried to erase him. When the Terminator exploded in 1984 and Terminator 2 redefined action in 1991, the world saw teamwork. What they didn't see was two forces at war behind the scenes, one trying to bend the other into silence, the other refusing to disappear. Even when Arnold called Cameron a genius, there was always an edge to it. Praise wrapped in memory. Gratitude tangled with the bruise of being pushed too far. In the end, their working relationship was never about friendship, it was friction. Two men driven by ego, ambition, and unyielding pride, pulling in opposite directions, yet forging something timeless in the struggle. Arnold never truly submitted. Cameron never truly relented. But that tension was the fuel. In the crucible of control and defiance, they forged a legacy neither could have built alone. Their partnership wasn't harmony, it was sparks flying, metal clashing, fire burning. And even now, when that line echoes, "I'll be back," you can still hear the argument buried beneath it. Cold, quiet, unfinished. As Cameron once put it, "I push actors because I know they can go further than they believe. And when they do, they carry the entire world of the film with them." Next, number 1, Ed Harris. When Ed Harris stepped into the cavernous tank of the abyss, he entered more than just a set. He entered James Cameron's pressure chamber, both literal and psychological. Cameron's new frontier was underwater, built within a decommissioned nuclear power plant and filled with millions of gallons of water. It was an engineering marvel and a battleground where human boundaries would be tested. Day in and day out, they dived deep into frigid water tanks, scuba gear clinging to their frames, submersed for hours. Skin blistered, lungs burned, nerves unraveled. The crew even coined a chilling nickname for the production: the abuse. Harris had expected intensity, but not this. A relentless descent into exhaustion, surreal tension, and near constant danger. The breaking point came during the iconic liquid breathing scene. Harris, beneath a helmet filled with pink-hued fluid to simulate liquid breathing, hit a wall. When the oxygen relay, placed just slightly too far away, without warning, failed him, panic rippled through his body. Water started flooding his breathing tube. Silence, or deadly stillness filled the tank. The life-saving regulator finally arrived, but it was spewing fluids. Every second stretched into infinity. Harris surfaced, lungs protesting, heart pounding. The moment he saw Cameron down there, filming calmly through his mask, something inside him shattered. He punched Cameron hard in the face. That visceral slam resonated far beyond the water's edge. Cameron, unshaken, didn't flinch. He simply adjusted a lens and continued shooting. No apology, no comfort, just a silent verdict. This is art, and life doesn't matter. Later that night, Harris pulled his car off set and wept. Tears of fear, anger, and betrayal. He was no longer just an actor. He was a man whose trust had been tested and broken. His on-screen intensity cracked into raw survival instinct. If Cameron thought Harris wasn't giving enough in performance or physical surrender, Harris had responded. Perhaps too well. Other actors crumbled too. Mary Elizabeth Mastrantonio snapped under Cameron's demands during the CPR slapping sequence, storming off set and screaming, "We are not animals!" a defiant roar against Cameron's cold calculus. Harris, forced to continue, reacted, slapping her harder, only to find the camera had run out of film. A moment of artistry became something darker. Harris had come to Cameron's tank to act, not sabotage. But Cameron cared less if he broke bodies, minds, even cameras, if it meant capturing something transcendent. From his perspective, Harris hadn't quite submitted. He performed, but never fully abandoned himself. He resisted, even when the fight became primal. That resistance became a barrier, a subtle fracture in their working relationship, one born of differing visions of submission. When production finally wrapped, 140 brutal days, $4 million over budget, the film emerged as a technical marvel. The Abyss won the Oscar for visual effects and dazzled audiences with its haunting beauty and otherworldly scope. Yet, Harris vanished. He declined interviews. He refused promotional appearances. Rumors swirled of a final break. Never again, he vowed. Character and director tied together in their own personal tragedy. Years later, a thaw emerged when their families overlapped. Harris offered a public olive branch. He still respected Cameron's talent. Cameron, backpedaling slightly, admitted he'd pushed things farther than he intended. There was no way to make it easier on everybody. In the world of cinema, few dynamics shape a film's soul more than the fragile yet powerful bond between director and actor. But within James Cameron's meticulously crafted worlds, these partnerships often turned into intense battlegrounds of creative will. The 6 actors who found themselves at odds with this cinematic titan shared immense talent, yet fell short of meeting his relentless demands. Their clashes reveal Cameron's core belief: true artistry is not about meeting halfway, but about surrendering completely to a vision where precision and passion collide without compromise. But what do you think happens when immense talent collides with a director who refuses to compromise? We'd like to hear your thoughts. Don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe for more.